Right now, Republicans have a nightmare scenario in Georgia's 2026 Senate race, and that is Marjorie Taylor Greene as the GOP nominee. This is a critical race, and the stakes could not be higher. Jon Ossoff is the most vulnerable senator up for re-election in 2026. He's not only the most vulnerable Democrat, he's the most vulnerable senator, period. Georgia is a battleground state, and with control of the Senate on the line, and I guess I shouldn't say the Senate because it's more the margin that they have in the Senate, Republicans cannot afford to fumble this one. We're going to be breaking down the 2026 midterms, why Brian Kemp is not running, how Marjorie Taylor Greene could become the nominee, and why that would be a disaster waiting to happen. So let's dive into it here. Republicans right now hold a 53 to 47 majority in the Senate after the 2024 elections. But in 2026, it is still a relatively good map for the Republicans at the end of the day. It's still a good map. Because at the end of the day, Republicans are most likely going to hold control of the Senate. Worst case scenario, Democrats, I think their ceiling's at 49 seats. This is where I have their ceiling. So even if they won all the toss-ups, they still don't have the majority. That's the reality of this situation. But the GOP has an advantage. 20 of the seats are in deep red states that Trump won by double digits. But Georgia and Michigan are rare pickup opportunities. These are Democrat-held seats in states that Donald Trump won in the 2024 presidential election. Trump won Michigan by 1.5 points. He won Georgia by 2.2 percentage points, making it a must-win for Republicans if they want to expand their majority. An incumbent Democrat, Senator Jon Ossoff, is running for re-election. He won the 2021 runoff election over David Perdue. Let's jump back here. This was a very, very tight election. David Perdue initially won the vote, but did not meet the 50% threshold needed. It went to a runoff. Jon Ossoff won the state. That's how things went. And Jon Ossoff is in a pretty decent position right now. He roughly has like $11 million cash on hand. $11 million cash on hand. You can see right down here. He's raised $31 million as of March and has $11 million cash on hand. And he is fundraising like there's no tomorrow. I am on the Democrats, their email list and their mail-in list. He is sending out stuff like there's no tomorrow. Truly, and he's calling for impeachment of Donald Trump at this point. Jon Ossoff is doing everything he can to position himself for a victory in this race. And we know he has a better appeal with African Americans, young voters, college-educated voters. And now there is some weakness to this midterm turnout often drops, especially for young voters. That you see a big drop there, which kind of gives Republicans an edge if they can field a strong candidate. But ultimately, if he's able to project this really sense that you need to get out and vote to stop the Trump administration, you need to fight back even people who voted for Trump. Even if he pulls, 5%, 10% of those voters, that's all it takes at the end of the day. It takes a simple majority at the end of the day. Remember, in a year that was supposed to be a good election for Republicans, Raphael Warnock won re-election over Herschel Walker by almost 3 points. In a year that was historically supposed to be good for Republicans. Now we're in a year that will be historically bad for Republicans. And with a bad candidate, it could be even worse than 3 percentage points, as we can see right here. And a GOP win in Georgia could solidify control of the Senate, especially with Trump in the White House. Midterms typically favor, like we said, the out-of-party power. So Democrats, they're going to be hungry for this. They are going to be going after this. And Republicans need a nominee who can not only bring together the Donald Trump wing of the party, the MAGA voters, moderates, but also independents. This is not a Republican plus 10 state anymore. It is not 2000 anymore. It is not 2004 anymore. You have seen solidly conservative districts, or I should say counties, in Georgia that have been shifting towards the Democrat Party. Look here, 2000. Democrats are winning Clayton County, Fulton County, and DeKalb County. You're seeing a lot of these surrounding counties are big victories for the Republican Party. Fast forward to 2024 when Donald Trump won the state. Look at this. Deep blue states, Newton County, Henry County, Rockdale County, Gwinnett County, Cobb County, Douglas County. Big victories for the Republicans. And look, it was even bluer. Actually, not really. It actually moved partially. Well, it's kind of here and there. We're not going to go too deep into that here. But ultimately, We can see that the suburbs around Atlanta are moving to the left. These are not Republican strongholds anymore. This is not a Republican plus 10 state anymore, and we have to realize that. Republicans, the bottom line is that Georgia is a golden opportunity, but you need the right candidate to do it. It's a golden opportunity for the right candidate. And we already know Governor Brian Kemp, he announced he is not going to be running for this election. Just a couple of days ago, he announced that he will not run for the Senate, citing family reasons, which is a bunch of BS. It's kind of like now we've lost Chris Sununu and Brian Kemp, two popular governors who could have won their states. I don't want to sit here and call them cowards. I think I called Brian Kemp in my previous video pathetic. And did I think that at the time? Yes. Do I truly believe that? No. I think it's kind of pathetic if he's going to try and run in 2028. I think that's pathetic. If it truly is about family reasons for not running, okay. But I just don't know. I don't have enough data to really back anything up at this point. Because Republicans saw him as the top recruit. Kemp has a 60% approval rating. He won re-election in 2020. Remember, a year that was supposed to be good for Republicans turned out to be really not that great. It was a lukewarm year for Republicans. Very lukewarm. And at the same time that Raphael Warnock won re-election by 3 percentage points, you also saw Brian Kemp win his election by 7.5 points. Remember, he was only elected by 1.5 points back in 2018. Increased his margin of victory to 7.5 points. So you're telling me there was almost a 10.5 point swing between the Senate and the governor's mansion. And polls showed Kemp neck and neck with Jon Ossoff. The most recent poll that we saw here was that Brian Kemp was leading Jon Ossoff roughly by 3 points. He was the only Republican who was leading Jon Ossoff, the only Republican within striking distance. Kemp, he proved that he can win statewide in a purple state. He fended off a Trump-backed primary challenge in 2022 and still carried the state and carried most Trump voters. And obviously him and, Kemp and Trump have repaired past tensions, but ultimately it's all for political reasons. They don't like each other, I'm guessing. It's my guess. But it's really unfortunate because, even the National Republican Senatorial Committee Chair Tim Scott was saying Kemp, he was the number one recruit, and his absence is going to leave a huge void in this race. And if Democrats win this in the fall of 2026, I think you got one person to look at, and that's Brian Kemp. Why are you not in this race? The GOP primary now is a free-for-all. Candidates like Buddy Carter, Rich McCormick, Mike Collins, Tyler Harper, John King are all circling, and Marjorie Taylor Greene are all circling, but none of them would put the type of fight that Kemp would. Kemp has deep pockets, he has a great ability to fundraise, and he is very popular in Georgia. That you need that matchup because the National Republicans were going to be willing to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at this race. Hundreds of millions of dollars at this race. And I think it's very safe to say that a polarizing figure like Marjorie Taylor Greene could sneak through a Republican primary. And if I were a Republican or if I were a Republican, I'd be sweating. Kemp was their safest bet to flip this seat. And now who do they have? Trump has thrown out the idea of Brian Jack. He's a young congressman from Georgia's 3rd congressional district, and we're going to just find that right now. And like we said, he represents Georgia's 3rd congressional district right here. Brian Jack, obviously it's a safe Republican seat. The previous congressman, Drew Ferguson, said that he was not going to run for re-election, obviously opened the void up for a younger Republican, someone like Brian Jack, to come in to... he was a senior advisor to Donald Trump in his 2024 presidential campaign and a former White House political director in the last 2 years of the Trump administration. Obviously, now he's in Congress. Donald Trump sees him as the top pick. He sees him as the top pick, and we're going to get kind of more into this right now, but we need to address the reality. The idea that Marjorie Taylor Greene could run for this seat here. That's a reality. She has toyed with the idea for a while now. That since 2023, she's toyed with the idea of running for this seat. And I don't feel great about this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she currently is a congresswoman from Georgia. She represents Georgia's 14th congressional district right now and is seriously considering a presidential run, saying that she would, quote, crush the competition. And there are some suggestions to show that she is gearing up and could secure a Trump endorsement. Now, obviously, I hope Donald Trump decides to endorse someone else, obviously. But here's the reality. Greene's a prolific fundraiser, a MAGA superstar, and gives her a pretty strong shot in a crowded primary with a lot of cash. Even if she didn't get the Trump endorsement initially and he didn't endorse anyone, I think she could, just look at the polls right here. Let's see if I've got a poll. This is a poll that just recently came out about a week ago. Marjorie Taylor Greene, 43% in a Senate primary poll. Just wonderful. Do we want to lose this seat? Marjorie Taylor Greene does a good job as the congresswoman from Georgia's 14th congressional district. Is she going to win in a statewide race, in an election that voted for Trump in 2016, a state that voted for Trump in 2016, voted for Biden in 2020, and then voted back for Trump? A state that with a kind of fringe candidate, not really the greatest pick, the Democrat was able to win re-election by 3 percentage points. This is not the race to toy around with. We have seen this time and time and time again. Look what happened in Pennsylvania with Dr. Oz. We lost this to I hate to say this, and I like halfway like John Fetterman some days. Halfway. I think it's a ploy at the end of the day. But he beat, literally someone who has brain damage, beat Mehmet Oz. You go to Nevada, where Adam Laxalt lost to Catherine Cortez Masto. You go to Arizona, where Blake Masters lost to Mark Kelly. These are more fringe candidates. Not as much Laxalt. I'll give him some credit there. Did he dabble in some stuff some conspiracies or ideas that I wasn't very fond of? Yes. But who doesn't? But you're looking at Arizona. This is a state that should have been won. You're looking at Pennsylvania. This is a state that should have been much more competitive than this. Much, much more competitive than this. Look at Georgia. Should have been much more. And you know what did it? It was a fringe Republican candidate. That's what did it. That's what did it. You want to see what happened in the special election when Brian Kemp put Kelly Loeffler in the Senate to replace, gosh, I forget what the senator's name was. He had been there for a freaking long time. Johnny Isaacson. I believe he retired. He either retired or he died. He resigned due to health issues. Yeah. He didn't nominate a great, like Kelly Loeffler. Okay, what does she do? She's running like the Small Business Administration now. Okay, great. Good for you. But this just wasn't a seat that you should have been in. But with multiple candidates in this race and Greene's national profile and cash flow, she could propel herself to a nomination. Greene is not just a long shot in the primary. She could be a political rock star for the far right and the conservative. I shouldn't even say far right. Sorry, but I don't mean the far right, but like the MAGA base at the end of the day. She's a massive following and a massive media presence. She could win a primary. Because that sort of stuff energizes the base. But it alienates in the general election. This kind of goes back to this YouGov poll. I've brought this poll on like 30 different times on videos. It talks about how Democrats favor electability in their candidates, or they say they favor electability in their candidates, while Republicans argue they want policy unity at the end of the day. Which, obviously, if you have policy unity but you can't win an election, what are you? You're sitting at your couch at home twiddling your thumbs. That's what you are. And if Trump endorses her, it's game over. And you have to give her credit. Look, she's a fighter. She's loyal to Trump. She resonates with the base. She's not afraid to shake things up. But the Senate race is not Georgia's 14th congressional district. Georgia's 14th congressional district, voted for her by 30 points. I bet you we could see right here, it voted for Trump by, let's see, President. Oh, they don't have what it was for her for the House race on here. Okay, but, Trump actually, he got 68%, Greene got 6. She actually ran 4 points behind Donald Trump in the county or in the congressional district. She ran 4 points behind Trump. That's like not a good showing for a plus, it doesn't really matter when you're at that point, but when you're talking about a statewide election, then that's a whole different animal. Because the polls, like we said, are brutal for her. They are brutal. A poll from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll showed that Ossoff would crush Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was the only, and I shouldn't say only, because there was one other when he went up against King, but he doesn't crack 51%. He cracks 50% in 2 of these. Ossoff would get 54% of the vote to Greene's 37%. And obviously, would this closen up the closer we got to the election? Absolutely. Do I think he would win by 17 points? No, I don't. Do I think he could win by 4, 5, 6 points? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If Marjorie Taylor Greene is there, absolutely. I totally think so. And here's a couple of pieces of data to see why. Greene is very unpopular with independents. 60% of independents in this poll say they would back Jon Ossoff in a matchup. And moderate Republicans, look at this. Nearly 10% of Trump voters say they would back the incumbent Jon Ossoff in re-election. Brian Kemp was the only person in this poll who led Jon Ossoff. The only one. With this poll with independents, only 26% say they would support Marjorie Taylor Greene. And now a different poll had Ossoff leading by roughly 12 percentage points. 12 percentage points you're looking at here. Versus 7, okay, you win by 1 point, you're still the senator. You know what they call someone who wins an election by 30 points or someone who wins an election by 1 point? A senator. A congressman. The president. That's what you call them. Because that's what this comes down to. And here's the reality. Nominating Marjorie Taylor Greene would be a horrible mistake for the Republican Party. It just would be. She's not just a long shot. There is no shot here. Look, if she would move away from some of these more QAnon ideas, 9/11, these different ideas of what actually happened on 9/11, and some really crazy inflammatory remarks, Jews shooting space lasers. If she would get rid of that stuff, it would totally help her. If she would lose some of that stuff. But she won't, and she hasn't. Her style will play well in a primary, but it flops in a general election. Like we said, just look at Herschel Walker in 2022. Candidate quality matters. And nominating Greene hands Jon Ossoff a very winnable race for the Republicans. His $11 million in, you have to agree, bipartisan appeal. He is winning 10% of Trump voters and 60% of independents in these polls. That is not good. It makes him formidable, and Greene's decisiveness makes her really a sit and duck at this point. And Democrats are waiting to jump at this. Ossoff's campaign manager came out and said that they are well prepared to defeat any challenger, but they're especially giddy about Marjorie Taylor Greene. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's loss will cost and could cost Republicans. And I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm not going to say it's impossible because you know what? Crazy stuff happens every day. I think it is very unlikely. It is very probable that if she is the nominee, Jon Ossoff will be reelected. And that will weaken the Republican majority when it should be strengthening the Republican majority, when they need it most, against a Democrat surge in the midterm. We need fighters, but we also need winners. Greene's a fighter. No one can doubt that. No one is saying she's not a fighter. But we need winners. Greene is great for rallying the base, but she is a liability in a state that Trump barely won by 2 percentage points, a state that Joe Biden won in 2020, a state that Raphael Warnock won in 2022. Republicans must pick someone. It's like John King, Buddy Carter, Brian Jack. I think, conservatives who have a much broader appeal who can actually beat Jon Ossoff. But they have a lot of character building, a lot of name building to do over the next 18 months. There's no doubt about that. But all in all, the 2026 Georgia Senate race is a must-win for Republicans, but nominating Marjorie Taylor Greene would be horrible for them. Without Brian Kemp, the GOP is stuck in a risky primary, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, polarizing style, could hand Jon Ossoff another 6 years in the Senate. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts. Do you think Republicans should take the risk on Marjorie Taylor Greene, or should they go with a safer bet? Drop your thoughts down below. And as always, don't forget to hit that like button. Smash that like button. Don't forget to share the video with your friends so we can grow our audience. That is the best way. And if you're wondering, if you've made it this far, I should probably say this earlier in the video. The best way to support our channel is just by watching our videos all the way through. That is what YouTube cares about. YouTube cares about your average view duration. How long does someone watch your video on average? That is how your video gets fed to more and more people. If you liked what we're talking about, if you liked, I consider myself a right-leaning independent. At the end of the day, most of my views align with the conservative Republican Party. I do have some views that are not in the Republican Party. I just do, and that's the reality. But ultimately, I want to see Republicans most likely in most states get elected. But if you like what we're talking about, we are going to call it out. I don't care what jersey you're wearing, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, if you're doing something stupid, if you're doing something that is not going to advance the policies that we promote, the agenda that we promote, we're going to call you out for it. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I truly don't. I don't care if, if John Fetterman comes out and says how much he supports Israel, great. I'm all about that. I'm not this person who, I love Israel. I like Israel. I think we should support Israel. But I'm not Ben Shapiro, that's for sure. But ultimately, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And folks, we will catch you next time.